So let's say someone decides, hey, I want to do a cost segregation. What does the process look like from like, um, I mean, you don't have to get to start to finish, but like generally speaking, like where do you start? Number one, like what what would a what would be like a qualification of like, hey, I have a building, here's the value, here's how many years I've owned it. Like what would you say, you know, speaking wise, like what would that look like?
So it's generally something you can ask your CPA about.
Hmm.
CPAs at this point, they should know about the principle of cost segregation, even if they can't really speak to it that well. Or you go to Google, but generally you should look at your tax return and see the amount of, well, one, do I own a building, right? So
Right.
okay, yes, I own a
It's
building.
a good step.
To go to my most recent tax return and see on that form 4562, what is the remaining basis in that building? Okay. If the remaining basis is $400,000 or more, then you should start thinking about, okay, can I squeeze some extra deductions out of this through cost segregation? Less than $400,000, the return on investment doesn't, it tends to not be there.
Okay.
Although in some cases it can make sense. Okay, so check 400. I have $1 million of basis in this building. All right, so yeah, we can
Yep.
think about cost segregation. The second thing, or I'm sorry, the third thing is, I just had it and it just escapes my mind.
Was it time?
Yes, it's time. So you have to think: do I plan on holding this building uh, for 5 years or more? And again, I don't want to get too deep into tax concepts, but there's something called depreciation recapture. So if you do a
Yes.
cost segregation and sell your building in the next year, you're just going to have a higher amount of capital gain tax at the ordinary income rate. So cost segregation, you want to hold it for 3 years, at least 3 more years after you do a cost segregation. Okay. Now you might ask, well, I've owned this building for 10 years, right? Does it make sense? It can. If you like, again, go back to that basis. If you still have a high amount of basis in this building, like you bought it for $10 million and there's still $5 million left of basis, yeah, even though it's 10 years old, cost segregation could make sense. Okay.
Hmm.
And then if I'm doing a major improvement, then think about, you might want us to talk about cost segregation because there's a bunch of different things you can do with improvements, which we won't get into, but cost segregation is one of them. So I
Yeah.
think we've got, four things there. Number one, I own a building. Number two, I have more than $400,000 in basis left in this building. Number three, I plan on holding this building for a long time. And number four, um, you know, well, I guess number four is I have income that I want to offset.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay. So then I check mark all those things. So then, we call up a professional like you. What happens
Yeah.
next?
So most cost segregation professionals should develop a free analysis of the building, right?
Hmm.
For us, we're gonna need the address and the basis and the year placed in service. Having the address allows us to do enough public records research to get a good just an overview of the building. If you have an appraisal, that's also helpful. But those are the things that you'll need to provide somebody for a proposal. And then we'll develop a model based on, a weak assumption and a strong assumption of the amount of components that can be accelerated. So the amount of that basis that can be accelerated. And we'll put together a full tax analysis. And so it's helpful for the CPA to show what the depreciation schedule is going to be like. We'll show what the year one deductions are, what the year 1 through 5 deductions are. And ultimately, a good proposal will show you return on investment. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, but
Yeah.
for the average building owner, you just want to know, is this a good return? Is this a good ROI? And generally, cost segregation is not something where the fees to do the study accelerate the more expensive the building gets, right? The ROI from cost segregation is generally pretty favorable.
Especially if you have a big building. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess the bigger the building, it doesn't really, I mean, there may be some added things you guys have to do, but I don't think the cost is ever going to get, expand as much as the VAT. I got like a $5 million building, you know, the work on a $2 million building versus a $5 million building, I'm assuming, is pretty similar.
Yeah, it's not double. Let's say that, right?
Yeah.
It's it's a little bit more. It's more work, but it's not double the amount of work. So the fee
Yeah.
doesn't double, right? $5 million building, which these medical practices are mostly office space. Office space is great for cost segregation because there's a lot of those movable components in the building.
Yeah.
Excuse me. You could expect like a potentially a 60-to-1 ROI.
Wow. That's crazy.
Even high. Like we just did a self storage facility, and they are looking at, I think, over 100-to-1 ROI.
Yeah. Now this won't work on property. Like, let's say some people have like Airbnbs or they have other rental properties like that aren't part of those grouping rules.
Yeah.
Like what would you've heard some people like make their spouse get a real estate license so they can do stuff like this. Yeah. Is that the only, like, what are the rules on that? If let's say someone does have like an Airbnb that they rent out or other things.
Yeah, good question. So Airbnb is good because there's something called the short-term rental strategy, which means if you are renting a dwelling unit or a property that's rented, I forget what it is, 14 days or less, but essentially an Airbnb, you can treat any deductions from that operation as active. That's just for short-term rental.